Over the past few years, Norway has pursued closer alignment with the EU. In May 2024, it signed a security and defence partnership with the EU. Last month, the EU's Defence Commissioner suggested that Norway could join the proposed European Defence Union. And just last week, Norway and Iceland became the first two non-EU countries to join the EU's space-based satellite communications initiative, IRIS², which aims to provide a European alternative to Elon Musk's Starlink. At the same time, public support for Norway joining the EU has ticked up, with between 35 and 40% of voters supporting EU membership. And in March, the leader of Norway's opposition pro-EU Conservative Party argued that Norway should join the EU, saying, "In my opinion, and in my party's opinion, we will be best served by being full members of the EU." So in this video, we'll explain Norway's current relationship with the EU, and why Norway is aligning more closely with the bloc. The next issue of our magazine is out very soon, with this issue focusing on all of the wars that Trump has been involved in during his second term, with each dot on the cover representing a different military intervention or strike. Inside, we run through each of the conflicts, from Venezuela and Iran to Yemen and Ecuador, as well as discussing what he's really doing. Pre-order your copy today at toolong.news. Let's start with some background on Norway-EU relations. While not an EU member, Norway is a founding member of the European Free Trade Association, which participates in the EU single market and Schengen area, and has been a member of the European Economic Area, or EEA, since 1994. Norway's government has actually tried to join the EU or its predecessors 4 times, in 1962, 1967, 1972, and 1994, with the attempts either blocked or turned down at a referendum. For instance, Norway's accession to the EEA in 1994 was widely seen as a stepping stone towards full EU membership, but a referendum on joining the EU was narrowly defeated, with 48% of people voting in favour and 52% against. Over the past 3 decades, however, Norway has become increasingly integrated into the EU's broader framework and initiatives. It now incorporates the vast majority of EU rules in EEA-related sectors, other than agriculture and fisheries, and is fully integrated in terms of the free movement of goods, services, capital, and labour in the Schengen area. Moreover, Norway has voluntarily aligned itself with the EU standards through a series of additional agreements, often mirroring the policy developments of its Nordic neighbours, Sweden, Finland, and Denmark. Nevertheless, Norwegians have remained divided on the issue of EU membership. After the 2008 Eurozone crisis, public support for joining the EU plummeted and opposition increased, both because the EU was beset by infighting and because the EU economy was struggling. However, in the mid-2010s, support for joining the EU slowly began rising, and spiked to a 2-decade high in 2022 after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. According to a February 2026 opinion poll for ABC News, opposition to joining the EU in Norway has now fallen below 50% for the first time, at 48%, while support for joining has ticked up to 38%, about the same as a year ago. Alongside this uptick in public support in the past few years, Norway's centre-left government has made numerous moves to align more closely with the EU. In May 2024, it signed a defence and security partnership with Europe. In May 2025, it signed a joint statement with the EU on strengthening EEA foreign and security policy cooperation, and more recently, last month, signed a participation agreement for the EU's IRIS² joint satellite programme. Through this series of deals, Norway can maintain formal sovereignty and the truce between its pro-EU and anti-EU political blocs, with the EEA membership model serving as a compromise between full membership and non-membership. Essentially though, there are 3 reasons why Norway is aligning more closely with the EU, despite not having an active accession bid. Firstly, rising public support for joining the EU. Secondly, Trump's impact on European and Arctic security. And thirdly, the general trend towards deeper European integration. Let's start with the first reason, though, that Norway is aligning more closely with the EU because of rising public support. Generally, EU membership has been a thorny issue in Norwegian politics, with the centre-right Conservatives being largely pro-EU, the centre-left Labour Party divided, and various smaller parties either being fiercely pro or anti-EU. In March, the new leader of Norway's Conservatives argued that Norway should join the EU, Adding, I've been talking consistently about the need for a constructive debate based on the EU as it is today, not as it was in 1994, and saying very clearly and loudly that Norway should join. This echoes calls made by her predecessor, who told the Financial Times last year, "We are by definition in favour of EU membership. If there comes a window to apply, we will apply." For now, the Labour government are reluctant to open up a formal debate, and are instead closely watching Iceland, the other non-EU Nordic country which has promised an EU referendum by 2027. The second reason is US President Donald Trump's impact on Europe. Early this year, the White House suggested that using the military to seize Greenland was, quote, always an option, sparking fears in Europe about America's policy towards the Arctic. This is of particular significance to Norway, with nearly half of Norway's territory in the Arctic, and also follows Russian threats made last year, when it accused Norway of militarizing Svalbard, a sparsely populated Norwegian archipelago nearly 1,000 kilometers from Norway's northernmost city, creating a potential pretext for military action. As such, Norway is working much more closely with the EU on Arctic security, and in March, the Norwegian Prime Minister hosted a summit in Oslo attended by the leaders of the 4 other Nordic nations, EU members Denmark, Sweden and Finland, plus fellow EFTA member Iceland, as well as Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney. A month later, Oslo also hosted an EU-Norway security dialogue, with the first ever EU-Norway Arctic dialogue also set to be held this spring. The third reason for Norway's closer alignment with the EU is the general push for deeper European integration, particularly on defence. In this unstable world, the EU is trying to make itself into a geopolitical power, and is trying to fold like-minded non-EU countries like Ukraine, Norway and the UK into its orbit. For instance, last month, the EU's Defence Commissioner suggested Norway could join the proposed European Defence Union, and a recent EU statement said, "We commended the increasing cooperation between the EU and Norway on military mobility." The EU clearly hopes that Norway, with its massive sovereign wealth fund, will be able to inject some financial firepower into the bloc's defence efforts. There was even some speculation in December that Norway could back a loan guarantee for Ukraine amid stalled talks on using frozen Russian assets, but Norway's finance minister firmly dismissed this, saying, "I have seen speculation suggesting that Norway could use our sovereign wealth fund as a guarantor for such a loan. This is not an option." Ultimately, because Norway already aligns with most EU legislation as an EEA member, apart from in politically sensitive areas like fishing, even if there is a growing number of Norwegians who support joining the EU, the status quo does seem to be working fine for Norway. So we shouldn't necessarily expect a Norwegian EU membership bid just yet. As I mentioned, the next issue of Too Long is out very soon. Plus, if you subscribe using promo code SUMMER26 at checkout, you'll get 20% off every copy as long as you stay subscribed, plus an additional £3 off your first copy. It's not just Trump's wars and conflicts either. The summer issue of Too Long contains news from each region, including pieces from elections around the world, including the UK, Bulgaria, Hungary, Slovenia and Denmark. A piece on whether we're heading into a new world war, the Euro's missing members, an update on what's happened following the Gen Z protests of last year, as well as a rundown of Trump's continued threats towards Greenland. Speaking of Greenland, if you didn't already know, we visited Greenland to film a series called What's the Big Deal with Greenland? While we were there, we explored the vast, impenetrable country, camped out on a glacier, and drove to the US's abandoned military bases. The first episode will be out very soon, with all episodes exclusively available to TLDR Party members. You can learn more about TLDR Party by clicking the link in the description, but the cheapest way to sign up is in a bundle with Too Long. So if you're going to subscribe to the latest issue of the magazine, then consider grabbing yourself a TLDR Party membership at the same time. Find out more about both at toolong.news.